All right, welcome, Con.
Yes, fantastic. Good to be back.
Fantastic. Take three.
Take three. Yes, beautiful.
Yeah, how do we go?
Mate, the response has been overwhelmingly positive. No one has had anything. It's just everyone's been. And
what
people.
are they saying?
Everyone's. When's the next one coming out? I've had people who I never would have thought were listening. They listened to it and they're like, they found it really informative, but also informal and entertaining. And, one person that I never would have thought would have, listened to a podcast like this, actually went and checked out the first few videos on the El Torpedo's website.
Yeah. So the conversation was a good lead up to.
I think it's
more of a classroom style.
Yeah. So and everyone's So like I said, they're at me for when the next one's coming out.
Wonderful. Well, I've enjoyed having these conversations. So let's get going.
Let's keep going. Yes.
What are we talking about today?
Well, tonight we're going to be talking about the Islamic sources, or do we have any eyewitness testimony? Because you remember we talked about the courtroom.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we talked about how both the prosecution and the defense have to deal with the same set of evidence, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And remember we said that some of the evidence that people that will be provided in some cases is eyewitness statements and eyewitness testimony.
Yeah.
And that's always good. That's always better if you can get hold of it, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to look at, do we actually have any, because we're putting the sin on trial.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what our podcast is. We're putting
standard Islamic
narrative.
Sin,
We're putting it on trial.
Yeah.
So we're going to see, are there any eyewitness sources that can defend the sin?
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to explore.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, I'm sure there are Muslim sources about Mecca and Muhammad. Why don't we just go with that?
Okay, well, that's a good question. And I suppose maybe I can clarify what do I mean by Muslim sources, because there's actually two types of Muslim sources.
Yeah.
Okay. We have the Quran, of course, right?
Yep.
And then we have these other sources that are called, we'll just call them the traditions, for want of a better word. There are 4 or 5 different kinds. There's one kind called hadith. There's another kind called sirah, which is the biography of Muhammad. Then there's the histories, and then there are commentaries. So we call them traditions.
Sure. Yeah.
And then you got the Quran, right? Now you might be asking, I'm sure some people have probably said, well, why don't we just go with the Quran? And there's an idea out there that, well, okay, we can just go with the Quran. Now, that idea comes actually, I think, from the Bible, because let me ask you this, Jim. Does anyone, if someone wants to be a Christian, do we need anything other than the New Testament to follow Christ?
No.
Even just the 4 Gospels will tell us, won't they?
Yeah, 4 Gospels gives quite a bit of information.
And okay, the rest of the epistles and all of that gives us sort of fine-tuning of doctrines and stuff. But about the life of Jesus, if you just wanted to write a biography of Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John would be enough, wouldn't they?
That's right, yeah.
The Quran's not like that. You can't get the life of Muhammad from the Quran. You can't get the teachings of Muhammad from the Quran. As a matter of fact, as we'll see, Muhammad's only mentioned mentioned 4 times by name. Mecca's mentioned once by name.
Right.
In the whole Quran. To put into perspective, Jesus is mentioned about 900 times through the New Testament. Okay? So someone who says that I'm just a Quran-only Muslim, that's actually not true.
Right.
Because the vast majority of Muslims in the world are Sunni. That comes from the word sunnah, the sunnah of the Prophet. The sunnah of the Prophet are the teachings of the Prophet. Right? And Muhammad is part of the Shahada. When someone wants to be a Muslim, there's no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. They're supposed to follow his messenger. How can you follow his messenger if you don't know what his messenger did and taught? Right? The Quran doesn't give you that. So it's the traditions that give you all that stuff.
Okay.
So does that make sense?
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah, so we sort of just, for the rest of the podcast, we're going to put aside the Quran because it's not going to give us any information. It's not going to help us examine
From a historical
perspective. That's right.
Yes. Okay.
You see?
Interesting. Yeah.
And Muslims might think the Quran is the word of Allah. They're welcome to do that, but it doesn't give us any historical evidence. You know, it doesn't allow us to put. It doesn't help us examine the claims of the sin and to see whether the sin is true or not true if we're looking at it from the historical perspective.
Big distinction. It's a big thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. All right. What else?
Well, I guess the big problem with the Islamic sources. Okay, let me ask you this, Jim. If you want, if I was going to say to you that I have eyewitness sources for the sin, okay, and I have eyewitness sources for Muhammad and his battles and his conquests and all that. That was in the 7th century, right? When would you like those sources to be written? In the 7th century or a couple of hundred years later?
Ideally, as they happen, written, and
that's right.
People who are alive can corroborate.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
A little bit like with the Gospels. The Gospels were written, 30 to 50 years within the lifetime of the apostles. That's right. Okay. Now, it turns out that the Hadith were written down, first written down, the traditions, were first written down AD 870. Now, I need to clarify. These are the death dates of these men. So this is when they died. So they're probably writing just before they died. But they died between AD 870 and AD 930. Now, how long after Muhammad died is that?
Yeah, close to 300.
Nearly 300 years, that's right. So, did any of them ever meet Muhammad? No. So were they eyewitnesses?
No.
No, that's right.
Doesn't sound like it.
No. So we don't. So the bottom line is we don't actually have any eyewitness testimony as a court would deem it for anything Muhammad did or said.
Okay.
We have stuff that was written down 300 years later, and we're expected to trust that.
Okay. So what's the explanation for that? What do the Muslims say?
Well, the Muslims have this really interesting explanation. And do you remember in our first when we were setting out the importance of the historical approach? And I said that one of the reasons they say that the Quran and everything was miraculous is because Muhammad was illiterate. Right, and Quran has all these wonderful things in it, and the reason it's a miracle is because he was illiterate. Now, remember, I'm not bringing the Quran back in, just so you know. I'm just saying that they make a big thing about the fact that Muhammad was illiterate. Okay, so if he was a preacher, he didn't write anything down because he was illiterate.
Yeah.
So what they say is that he taught people. Who taught people? Okay, who taught people?
Yeah.
Who taught people? Right, and what happened was you had, person A told person B, told person C, told person D, told person E, told person F, who eventually wrote it down 200 to 300 years later. So, and what they have are these things called isnads, or chains of transmission.
Yeah.
And they'll say so and so told so and so told so and so told so and so told so and so. Right, who wrote it down?
Yeah.
And working back, it's person E heard it from person D, who heard it from person C, who heard it from person B, who heard it from person A, who heard it from Muhammad, allegedly.
Okay.
And that's what they have this concept called hadith science, where they have all these criteria about which ones are valid and which ones are not. And it's all very complicated. And just to give you a brief summary of how this works, one of the tradition writers, and one of their main ones, is a guy called Al-Bukhari, and his hadith collection is called Sahih Al-Bukhari. There's like 6 volumes of it, right? And what Al-Bukhari did, he's called Al-Bukhari because he lived in Bukhara, which is like in Uzbekistan or somewhere out there. Okay, so a long way away from Mecca, by the way. All right. Yeah. He wrote. So by the time he was writing in the 9th century, because he died in 870.
Yeah.
So he was writing, let's say 850. Right. By then there were 600,000. There were hundreds of thousands of sayings about Muhammad. You know, a little bit like how the Gnostic Gospels about Jesus, several, you know, all these wonderful things, but that's another story. But he had the story goes that he took 600,000 of these sayings, examined them all, and threw out, whittled them down to 6,000. 6,000 and something. So just under 2%. So he threw out 98% of these sayings.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be interesting to know which ones he threw out? You know, what criteria? How did he know that they were? Because he didn't get it from any eyewitnesses either. So he just arbitrarily had invented this set of criteria that said, well, this is why I think it's authentic, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, we're supposed to reflect, and basically they say that because they have these accurate chains of transmission, they know who said what to who, that we are supposed to accept it. And they also say that all these people were good people. They were virtuous. They wouldn't lie. Well, how do they know they wouldn't lie? You know, I mean, how do they know they didn't mishear? You know, because as I said, it wasn't that person E read what person D wrote, who read what person C wrote, etc. They heard it. So-and-so heard it from so-and-so, heard it from so-and-so. You know? So does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's what they say.
Yeah. And oral tradition was a big thing, you know, even in Judaism, perhaps.
But the difference is, okay, and some people might say that, oh yeah, but Christianity had oral tradition to begin with. Yeah, but the Gospels were written down within about 30 years.
So anyone could just, you know, who's living can say, well, what you wrote is wrong.
Exactly. Exactly. And Paul even says that in 1 Corinthians 15. He talks about the gospel that I was given, and there are some people who are still alive, and some have fallen asleep.
Yes.
So he's saying that you don't believe what I've read, go and check with them.
All right.
You know. So you go.
All right. So yeah. So some people might accept it as good enough. What do you think?
Look, the problem I've got a lot of problems with that explanation, right? You know, firstly, if Muhammad was as good, he was the last and greatest prophet. That's what they say. Muhammad came to fix everything that the Jews and Christians messed up. You know, and our Bible's supposed to be corrupted, right?
Yeah, that's what they say.
That's what they say, right? Why didn't anyone write it down? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If he was such a successful businessman, because that's what the sin says he was, surely he would have been able to read and write. I mean, how could you conduct business if you couldn't read and write? You know what I mean? And you know, as I said before, one of the reasons why the Jews and Christians, why the Gospels were written down early on, is because the apostles were starting to get killed. And they realized we need to write this stuff down. Otherwise we're going to lose it. Right? And here's another problem I've got with it. Say 632 Muhammad dies, according to the sin, okay, 632 Muhammad dies, but historically we know that the Arabs did conquer the Middle East. Right? So by 634 they start to conquer Jerusalem. You know, by 661, when Muawiyah is crowned, from there he takes Egypt. Right? By 674, he's actually laying siege to Constantinople itself. Right? So the Arabs conquered that whole area. Now let me ask you this, Jim. Do you think there was nobody in that whole region of Israel and, you know, Jordan and Syria and Turkey that was everybody illiterate? No. There were stacks of people that could read or write. Okay? And, you know, if Muhammad was such a wonderful preacher, such a wonderful prophet, and his teachings were so important, you know, why didn't Muawiyah actually say, listen, Mr. Sophronius, you know, you bishop, whatever, write them down for me? Why not? Why didn't he write them down? Right? And they can't use the excuse that they didn't have the money Because one of the reasons why Christian scriptures weren't written down early on, we don't have that. We've got 5,000 Greek manuscripts, but really early ones, the first full copies we've got is from the 4th century, because they were written on parchment, and the early Christians wrote on papyrus, which disintegrates. But the Muslims didn't have that excuse. They could have written things on parchment straight away, right? And there's also traditions. There's traditions that in the Muslim traditions themselves that said Muhammad had approximately 40 scribes. What do scribes do?
Yeah, right.
They write. Or secretaries. What do secretaries do?
Yeah, write it down.
They write down. So if Muhammad had all these scribes, then why did nobody write it down for 300 years?
Okay.
It just doesn't, I mean, you tell me, Jim, does that make sense?
Yeah, sounds like Chinese whispers.
100%. Chinese whispers. So tell us, what's Chinese whispers, Jim?
Yeah, the children's game.
Yeah, well, how does it work?
One person says something to somebody else, and then this person says something to somebody else.
Yeah.
And then by the time it gets around here, the story has changed, or something like that.
Yeah, it's actually quite funny to watch, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Like the message you whisper to somebody in this person's ear, by the time it gets to the person at the end of the chain, it's completely different.
Yeah.
Now, how long does that take? That takes 15 minutes? So if we get that, and some people call it the telephone game, right? But if you get that from 15 minutes of oral transmission, imagine 300 years of oral transmission, So I'm sorry, but I don't accept it. Number one, it doesn't make it's common sense. Anyone with a bit of common sense that's ever even heard of Chinese whispers is going to say, that's just Chinese whispers, what you're trying to get me to believe.
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So are there any academics who have studied this claim?
Interestingly, there are actually a number of academics who now, one of the challenges is some academics who study the sin, they try and have a bit of a bet each way, right? They try and maybe they're a bit afraid to upset Islamic sensibilities or whatever. But there's a book here that I've got. I'm just gonna. So this book here, called Creating the Quran, by I'm sure you can see it. Can you see it?
We've lost the page. It's gone to the...
Oh, sorry. There we go. My fault. There we go. The blips. The wonders of technology. Can we see that book? Yes, beautiful. So Creating the Quran by Stephen Shoemaker, right? And what he did was he actually studied their claims. Because what they claim, I should have also clarified, the Muslims claim that the memories, because the early Arabs, because they were an oral culture, their memories were far superior to ours, right? And they say, look, we've got people who've memorized the Quran from the age of 7 or whatever, It's a bit of apples and oranges, as I'll get to later. Yeah. But okay, Shoemaker decided to study this. So he says, all right, you're claiming that your memories are fantastic, and you can memorize stuff verbatim, and you're claiming that you can transmit the information orally, person to person, verbatim. You know what verbatim means? Word for word, right? Yeah. So he studied it, and there's actually 2 or 3 chapters in that book. They're very long chapters, where one chapter he looks at what does memory science tell us. Yeah. And what he found, the research, not what he found, the memory science research from psychologists and neuroscientists, etc., tell us that, and it's pretty across the board, people forget 75% of what they hear within 1 week. Now, Jim, when you went to school, did your teachers do revision with you?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. You know why? Because you forgot what they told you. You forgot 75% of what you heard. People who are listening to this podcast, if all you do is listen and don't go to the Torpedoes website and get more information, in a week's time, you'll have forgot 75% of what you heard. Yeah. That's all of us, And he found that the memories of people in oral cultures were actually not as powerful as the memories of people in literate cultures. It sounds counterintuitive, but what he found was that when you've got writing, it frees up your brain and your memory to remember stuff better.
Okay. Yeah.
Whereas when you don't have writing, you use up, it's a bit like a hard drive on a computer. You use up a lot of space just trying to remember stuff that could be written down, frees up the space to do other things.
Interesting. Yeah.
And in terms of this claim that that people memorize it today, therefore they could memorize it back then. Do you know why they can memorize it today, Jim? How do you think they memorize it today? The Quran. Let's say they.
Oh, the Quran. Yeah, they just. It's repetitive. Well, they read out of a book.
See?
Yeah.
What have they got?
Yeah, they got a written.
They've got a written text. Fantastic. You can memorize from a written text. You see? But we're not talking about that. They're not. The Muslims aren't claiming that. They're claiming that they just heard it. And like click, like they've got tape recorders in their heads.
Okay.
And they recorded everything. Okay, so that claim fails.
Yeah.
The verbatim memorization claim is just not supported by the evidence.
Okay.
Now, the second, because I've got to finish the second claim. What's their second claim? So the first claim is that person A memorized it word for word from Muhammad.
Yeah. And
the second claim is that person A transmitted it word for word to person B, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the second claim up there. Well, Shoemaker studied that too.
Yeah.
And what Shoemaker did was he went to cultures that used oral tradition.
Yeah.
Because they're still around today. Like in jungles and those primitive cultures and things like that.
Yeah.
And he looked at the anthropological data. So anthropologists have done this. They've gone to these cultures, lived with them, and they looked at the fact, and they looked at how these cultures transmit their history, and they do it via stories.
Yeah.
Right. And when they tell a story, well, let me ask you this, Jim. When you and your family tell stories about your father or grandfather who's long passed, is the story always the same, or do certain elements change along the way?
A few elements change.
That's right.
Along the way, but yeah.
Yeah, the skeleton's the same.
Yeah.
But when you tell a story, like your brother might tell a story about something. Oh no, that's not how it happened.
Yeah.
Or you might tell a story one way to your kids, and then you tell it again a year later. They says, "Oh, Dad, you didn't tell it that way."
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
The same basic facts were there, but you changed some of the details.
Yeah.
Right. And he said that's how people transmit information. It's a bit like a skeleton. A bit like, the basic skeleton of a story is there, but each person, when they tell it, puts on their flesh and their bones.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, and as a matter of fact, these cultures thought that just having the same rote repetition of the story was actually not a good thing, because it was boring. Right? Sure. So it's a bit like a performer. Each night they perform a bit differently. And so Shoemaker found that the only way to guarantee that verbatim word for word transmission was a written text.
I find it fascinating. It's slightly related that when kids or people they say they've memorized the Quran.
Yeah.
They've actually memorized the Quran in Arabic.
Yes, as well.
In a language that they don't understand.
That's right.
So I find it fascinating,
and that's right, and
because they don't understand it probably doesn't vary.
That's right. They don't understand what's
code.
That's right. Yeah, it's like code. But can you memorize a code without having it written down?
Yeah.
No. As a matter of fact, Shoemaker looked at the research. I think there was an experiment where a guy tried to memorize like 50 words, like the number of words, like one after the other, just oral, by hearing it. The most words someone got to was 50.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And last I checked, the Quran was a lot more than 50.
So surely there are some Muslim academics, who study this. So what's their response?
Well, it's interesting you say that. There are some Muslim academics. Now, some, I think, just put their heads in the sand. And see, it's funny, you know, like I've never actually had a Muslim give me a good, especially when you raise the Chinese whispers. You know, like they had, I was talking to you know, I mentioned before I was talking to a Muslim evangelist, and I said, how do you know any of that happened? And he says, oh, because it was the Prophet's wife that said this, and she wouldn't lie. And I said, well, how do you know?
Yeah.
You know, you're assuming no one has ulterior motives, number one, but also the evidence we just saw that they forget. You see, like Shoemaker again. You know, they forget. You're assuming it, and I just, you know, no one's ever been able to. You know, whenever I challenge them with this, well, you see Chinese whispers happening in your kids. How do you know it didn't happen over 300 years? No one's given me a good, no Muslim has given me a satisfactory explanation. So, and to confirm this, on July 10, 2025, there was a Muslim academic called Yasir Qadhi, very famous, you know, and to his credit, what he's tried to do is bridge the gap. So he's got qualifications, so he says, from the University of Medina, or whatever they call Al-Madina University, but he's also got a PhD from Yale.
Yeah.
Right? And he was a professor at a university in Texas until a little while ago. And political reasons, he didn't go any further. But there was a channel called Skepsis Islamica, an interview, and they asked him about this, right? And basically, he said that no one in the Western academia sees the Muslim science, the Muslim concept of hadith science, as credible. Now, he says that he believes that the traditions are correct, but he accepts them as a matter of faith or belief. Now, let me read to you what he said. So, I've just taken this word for word from the interview. There is no middle ground between, and he said, an historical critical method. In other words, remember the historical method?
Yeah.
What we're going to use to analyze? He said historical critical method and isnad analysis, in other words, analysis of those traditions, are two diametrically opposed ways of looking at early Islam. Diametrically opposed, mutually exclusive. He goes on to say two diametrically opposed epistemologies. Epistemology is like a way to know something, right? And then he says that one will have to navigate the religious side of things if you are a believing Sunni Hadith believer in a different epistemology, and when you are arguing in the academic world, you will have to use a different epistemology.
Right.
You see, they're mutually exclusive. And then the last part, this is really, really damaging, I think. Quote, nobody in the academic world, nobody in the academy affirms the Muslim Sunni science of hadith. Nobody. It is considered to be completely discredited, unquote. They're his words, not mine. Although I 100% agree with him, right? And then he goes on to say, I'm just being factual, I'm describing. And then this is the killer statement. As for definitively stating that the hadith go back to the Prophet, in other words, the traditions go back to the Prophet, at this stage of my life, I will have to say this is what I say as a believer and not as an academic.
Yeah.
What do you think of that, Jim?
Well, we got someone who's an expert.
Yeah.
Saying, well, you know, staying true to his education and his work.
That's right.
Yeah.
And he's saying,
can't consider it.
Sorry?
Science. Yeah.
Yeah. So can we consider anything historical then?
No.
No.
Yeah.
No. So you said before, like, okay, that this whole hadith science thing. Do you notice what he said? I can believe that as a Muslim in a mosque.
Yeah.
But I can't believe it as an academic.
Yes. Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
And so you and I, we're not believers. We're not Muslims. So why should we trust what they're saying? You know? So bottom line is, you know, the verdict. Okay, we talk.
Outcome, yeah.
What's the verdict? You know, the sin explanation. Well, let me ask you this. I'll ask you, and you tell me.
Yeah.
Does the sin explanation, does it have explanatory power? In other words, does it explain the evidence?
It's not convincing.
No. Okay. Does it tell us? Do you think that based on the standard Islamic narrative that we actually have eyewitness testimony?
No, it doesn't. Yeah.
That's right. And do you think that the Islamic explanation and that we can trust that 300-year gap? Do you think that is credible?
It's not credible.
It's not credible because one of their own academics says it's not credible.
Yeah.
You see, so bottom line is, I think the sin has failed that test. We have no eyewitness testimony.
Yeah.
The sin hypothesis fails to examine the evidence, and bottom line is the first torpedo scores a direct hit.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, so that's it. And I, you know, I want to contrast briefly with the Bible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like for like.
Like for like, yeah. I mean, well, Jim, you've read that book called Case Christianity?
I haven't read it.
Sorry, but you know about it, yeah?
I know about it.
Yeah. So what was the premise of him? What did he do?
Yeah. So this is James Warner Wallace.
Yeah.
He was a cold case detective.
Yeah.
And he was an atheist.
Yeah.
And he got challenged to look into the Bible. And I remember, you know, he bought a $6 Bible.
Yeah.
Because he didn't want to spend too much money.
Yeah.
But then, long story short, he read the eyewitness accounts.
Yeah.
And for him, the Gospels.
Yeah.
And he related quite a bit to that because you know that's the same account, similar accounts told by 4 different people.
Yes.
About the same historical event.
Yeah.
Or events.
Yeah.
And based on his training.
Yes.
He actually was able to believe that it was true simply based on how everything was laid out.
Yes.
It's not every 4 eyewitnesses saying the exact same thing.
Yes, 100%. Because then they've colluded.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not like something that was man-made later on.
Yeah.
It was actually how it was, because this eyewitness would have, you know, said a bit more detail about this part, whereas this eyewitness said a bit more detail about this story.
Yeah, that's right. It's like 4 people looking from 4 different directions at the same person. They describe, like if I'm looking at you from this direction, I describe things about your front. Someone from behind describes, and effectively what J. Warner Wallace and I think we need to be clear. I mean, we can't say, I don't know if we can say that you know, he became a believer there and then. But what he did conclude after looking at the Gospels was that they had all the characteristics of eyewitness statements.
Yeah.
And in his job as a cold case detective, often he was looking at cases that were 30 and 40 and 50 years old, and everybody's dead. Mm-hmm. The perpetrator's dead. The eyewitnesses are dead.
Yeah.
The only thing he's got left is the eyewitness statements. And so the Gospels, we don't have that problem in Christianity. We have credible statements that people can accept as being eyewitness statements that were written within the lifetime of the eyewitnesses.
Yeah.
You know, within the life, because we know that, you know, Paul and Peter were martyred around AD 65.
Yeah.
Right? We know that you can make a good case for Luke being, you know, Mark and Luke being written before AD 70.
Yeah.
You know, and Matthew as well. John is written later.
Yeah.
But then we know that John didn't die till AD 90. Mm-hmm. Right, so they were all written within the lifetime of the eyewitnesses. They're credible eyewitnesses. So we don't have the problem that the sin has.
Yeah,
the sin fails the eyewitness test. Mm-hmm. So I think that and that just I want everyone to know we're sort of we're not being unfair. We're comparing like for like. Now, someone doesn't have to believe that the gospel is true.
Yeah,
but we can show that there was a man called Jesus of Nazareth, as I said, and that the gospel accounts are credible eyewitness accounts that describe his life.
Yeah,
you know,
the way that it's recorded.
Yeah, the way it's recorded.
2,000 years ago, the way it's been.
The way it's recorded, the way they're written, the way they focus on some things and skip over others. Yeah. You know, and you've got different people with different personalities.
Yeah.
Like, you know, Matthew is very sort of like, shall we say, organizational, because he was a tax collector.
Yeah.
And Luke records the fine details because he was a doctor.
He's a doctor, yeah.
You know, Mark focuses on Peter because Mark was Peter's interpreter. So that's why you get a lot more information, a lot more things about Peter from Mark. So it all fits, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
You know, and whether that doesn't prove that Jesus is God or that Christianity is true, right? Yeah. But it at least proves it's historical.
Yeah.
Which is what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Amazing.
Fantastic.
All right. Well, what are we talking about next?
Well, firstly, I just want to make sure I've convinced you, Jim. So, do you reckon that that there are any eyewitness testimony for the sin?
Based on what you've told me today, yeah, it's unlikely.
Unlikely. Okay.
Yep.
So we've got to scrap that evidence. So we've got to put aside the Islamic sources.
Yeah.
So would that be fair to say?
And specifically, it's talk about everything we know about Muhammad.
Everything we know about. So when we're talking about Mecca, Muhammad, and the Quran, we've got to put aside the Islamic sources.
Yes.
Okay, because they're written too late.
Yeah.
That's the message I want people to take.
Yeah.
So what are we left with? Okay.
Yeah. What do we got?
Well, we're left with the stuff that's outside the Islamic sources. So we're left with things like archaeology. Yeah. So we'll look at that. We're left with sort of non-Muslim sources from the 7th century. Again, remember, from the 7th century,
Sure.
You know, look at that. We look at, especially when we look at things like the Quran, we'll look at textual criticism, like looking at, okay, how was it put together, how was it preserved, those sorts of things. And we can look at other evidence for things like carbon dating, also geographical evidence, because when we're talking about Mecca. Yeah. All right. So the next podcast we'll be starting with Mecca. So we'll be looking at specifically the archaeological evidence, and firstly we'll look at what does the sin say about Mecca.
Okay.
And then we've established that we can't use any of the Islamic sources. So then we'll look at, okay, we'll start looking at what are the non-Islamic evidence say about Mecca.
Yeah, that's good. And what popped into mind was, over the last 1,000 years, you had the Gnostic Gospels, for example. They were thrown out.
Yes, 100%.
Because they found, do you have any more information about why certain books of the Bible were thrown out?
Well, for
Gospel of Thomas.
Yeah. Well, for the precise, the Book of Enoch is an apocryphal book, so that's a bit different. But the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Judas, the Gospel of Barnabas, the Gospel of Mary, Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Peter.
They found it was written much later.
100%.
Potentially falsified.
That's right. So what the Church Fathers used the same criteria that we're using.
Yeah.
They said, okay, were any of these apostles?
No.
No, none of them were. Were they written by apostles? No. Right? Even though they were attributed to the apostles, that's different. That's an attribution.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it's written.
Yeah.
Right? Like, for example, it was about the Thomas. Thomas was the doubting Thomas, right? Yeah. He was a disciple. But he didn't write it. It was written in the 2nd century. Right? And they have stuff that doesn't fit with, has Jesus doing weird stuff.
Yeah.
Like kissing Mary on the mouth, for example.
Yeah.
Or, talking from the cradle.
Yeah.
Or making clay birds and then breathing on and giving them life, So the Church Fathers, bless their heart, and the Church Fathers, so people know, are the in between the death of the apostles, which is around the 1st century, and the time Christianity was decriminalized under Constantine, which is the 4th century. We had men who were the disciples of the disciples. Like, for example, John had a disciple who was called Polycarp, and then he has another one had a disciple and disciples of disciples, and we call them the Church Fathers, and we have what they wrote. And what they did was they looked at those Gospels, and they rejected them unanimously because they weren't eyewitnesses. They couldn't be traced back to one of the apostles, and they rejected them as being eyewitness statements. Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I think that's it.
Fantastic.
Enough for now.
Enough for now.
Today.
Enough for today.
Thank you so much. That was enlightening.
Fantastic. All right. Beautiful.
Till next time.
Till next time.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.